Death Note is known for being one of the most innovative and genre-defining manga of its time. I don't think anything's come quite as close to being as amazingly heart-clenching and gripping as this series. For a long time, I didn't let it in, but once I did, I fell in love with it. Now, back in the day when Death Note was first coming out as an anime, they released some really terrible-looking Nendoroids. I mean super ugly. These were some of the earliest produced Nendoroids, and it shows. So it's so great to see that they decided to re-release Light Yagami, and that's right, they re-released L as Nendoroid 1200. First off, it's crazy to think that we've had that many Nendoroids, but it's also crazy to think that it took this long to get L to come out. I mean, make no mistake, there is an L Nendoroid, but it was number 17 in the series, so it is incredibly primitive compared to what we have today. And fresh out of the box, here is L. And man, this is actually really refreshing because this Nendoroid is incredibly nice. Now, you may not think that he looks much different than other Nendoroids, but when you really get in there, there's a lot going on here that I think is an improvement over some of the older ones. Obviously enough, the design is just wonderful, and this is a great representation of L, but there's so much here that I think is getting overlooked. For starters, I'll say that he has a much different texture than some of the other Nendoroids. He actually kind of has a matted finish almost. It's hard to show you on camera, but in hand you can feel that he just feels different, and certainly more qualitative to me. One thing I gotta say is that his sculpt is absolutely wonderful. He comes with his hands in his pockets by default here, which is shown by the tips of his sleeves having those little blue marks on them, which is supposed to represent his hands in his pockets, but still, I think this looks great. His clothes in particular stick out rather nicely. His shirt has a little bit of wrinkling in it, which allows for some natural shading, as well as his hands come default in his pockets with these little tiny blue nubs at the edges of his wrists. And also, his pants here look pretty decent. You can see there's a little fold here in the edges right before his feet, as well as even a little pleat and the flap where his button would be in the center of his trousers. The face is as cold and lethargic and dead as you would expect L to be. But I've gotta say, his hair looks spectacular. And another thing to note about his hair is that it's actually kind of soft. If you could feel this, you'd understand. It's sort of like a PVC, I guess, but it's definitely a little bit more flexible, which I do like. I feel like Nendoroids are pretty much known to have limited articulation, but that's completely fine because it usually works pretty well. He has a simple ball peg joint for his neck, which allows his head to go up and down, and of course it can swivel side to side as well. Now his arms are on peg joints, so that means they only have an up and down. There's no more articulation than that. And on his additional arms, his hands are of course on peg joints as well, meaning they can be swiveled. His waist is very limited. It is on a peg, so you can move it, but not much. Next, his legs are also on ball peg joints, meaning they can go in and out just ever so slightly and be swiveled as well. And finally, he has some pretty cute little footsies here, and they have the ability to be swiveled, but you really can't even tell. And after unpacking L, and I do mean unpack, he comes with quite a bit. One of his larger accessories is this chair here, which I think actually looks pretty nice. The edges of the handles look great too. There's some subtle detail in there, curved out with those little notches, as well as some trim along the bottom of the chair. And all of this pearly white is sort of a metallic look, which actually looks pretty good in contrast to the red, which is more flat. There's even some grooves in there for his butt cheeks and his feet, which will allow him to sit there comfortably. And there's even a little peg that can plug into the back of the figure. Now, if you want L to use the chair, you're going to have to pop off his legs. And then you take this small pair of folded legs and plug those into his waist. Another thing I really like is that the bent legs are actually posable, so you can actually pivot those if you'd like, which would allow you to put him just kind of sitting on his butt. I actually really like this. This is super adorable. If you can get him to sit upright like this is a great way to display him. It reminds me of like a pet almost. It's pretty adorable. But I suppose he can no longer put his hands in his pockets, so let's switch out his arms too. And the suggested arms here are actually bent at the elbow, which allow him to put his hands on his knees, which is a pretty cute pose. And this works great for the chair. What I really like about him being in the chair is that you don't have to put him on the Nendoroid base, which is great because you could just put this on your desk or on a shelf and not have to worry. I rather do like that. This is a wonderful way to create more immersion for a figure, and it just looks good for him to be sitting there like that. Another thing to note is that you can actually remove that peg from the chair. Which I do really appreciate because then you don't have to worry about potentially scratching up his back. because with a red peg going into a white socket, if you miss it and scratch around a bit, you could very well put a mark on the figure, so I do appreciate being able to remove that. And he pretty much holds his own weight well enough. And of course, in the chair you can attach even more accessories to him. And still rather unenthused, he sits here now with a piece of cake, as well as a fork to eat it with. This is incredibly appropriate for L because obviously enough, he cannot stop snacking on sweets in the show and manga. So this is a great attachment for his character. There's not much else you can do with them, but I do appreciate the inclusion. The fork and cake look nice enough. They're small accessories, so I am glad that they do have the amount of detail that they do. Though the fork has some weird kind of ball at the tip of it, which makes me think you might be able to move it around, but I don't want to break anything, so I'm not going to try to. But he looks a little miserable for having a piece of cake. And like all of the flagship Nendoroids and Figmas from Goodsmile, you can actually remove his faceplate. As usual, we just pop off the hair. And let's remove that angry little face of yours. Now let's at least try to make you seem a bit happier before your demise. And let me tell you, they do you dirty, boy. And there we go. I do like this face a lot, actually. This is perfect for L because he's never overly exuberant, but of course he can show some happiness. I like it. It's not overly happy, but it is enough to suggest, yes, I'm excited that I have my cake here. Oh, and if you wanted something more brooding, don't worry. He comes with this somewhat worried face as well, which allows him to even chew his thumb with the attached handpiece there. I actually really like this one a lot too. Pretty much everything here is hitting home really well. Now, in addition to all of this, we come down to our final accessory, which is kind of hard to show you. It's an actual pair of handcuffs. Yeah, these are pretty intense. There's an actual chain linking the two wrist pieces together, which looks really good. And of course, the idea here is to link him and Light Yagami together because there is, of course, a 2.0 Nendoroid of him as well, of which I don't have yet, which is funny because I actually like Light a lot more than I like L. But still, maybe I'll get him soon. I'll be honest and say that I can't find many things I dislike about this Nendoroid. A lot of things that I've had problems with recently have been being addressed. The quality standard seems to be on the rise. It seems like they're doing things to improve the figures. From detachable neck pieces in case you may have broken a joint, to even numbering the tops of the faceplates, there's a lot of little things that they're doing that is improving the line. In addition to that, it seems to be made of better quality plastic than some of the other Nendoroids, so I've got to say this is trending upwards for me. I said just a moment ago that I'm a bigger Light fan than I am L, but I absolutely love this little Nendoroid. I'm more than likely going to keep this because I really do enjoy it. There's a lot you can do with him, and it's a lot of fun to play with him and pose him. Along with Light, I think these two would go great in some photos. And of course, some of his accessories could be utilized for other Nendoroids as well, such as maybe the cake and the hand that it goes into, and even the chair possibly. All in all, I am going to give the L Nendoroid a solid 9 out of 10. Again, I'm surprised at how much I really did enjoy this, but there's really no denying it. The only thing that I could say is that I was missing maybe one accessory, maybe just this one little thing that they could add in that would have bumped this up to a 10. But besides that, the quality control, the painting, the sculpting, everything here is done super well. So I can't hate it at all. But what do you think? Do you think this was a cool figure, or do you think it was kind of boring? Let me know below and drop a comment. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me what you dislike. And if you did like the video, make sure to please like the video because it really helps me out. This was a lot of fun to make, and at this rate, I pretty much have to get Light, so stay tuned for that because it will be coming soon. I'm gonna link something up in the corner here, and make sure to click it because it does help the channel, and I do put a lot of effort into these videos. Thank you so much for watching, have an amazing weekend, and keep on collecting.